Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy, Nate Weitzer, as always on the East Coast. And we are looking at 10 games here, Nate, on Wednesday night. In this one, we're taking a look at the Nuggets and the Bucks taking each other on in Milwaukee. In that one, got a really good slate of games for you. Another good video with the Grizzlies and Warriors, as well as our player props. And we're bringing you these videos each and every weekday this season, so make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Also, head to thelines.com. You can check out everything we've got up there, written content and the like for the NBA this season. You can also use our odds finder tool on there. That's where we give you guys all the best odds available on all these bets you're making in the NBA this season. Nate, let's go ahead and jump into this slate and then talk Bucks and Nuggets.
Yeah, the Pacers pulled out a win without Halliburton last night, and they're +6 at Orlando. Another game we wanted to look at, but Embiid is questionable. The Sixers are -5 at home against the Nets that managed to win 2 straight on that at the end of that road trip. Now on extra rest is Brooklyn. Minnesota +2.5 at New Orleans, which just played a very low-scoring game against these Nuggets last night. Washington won a high-scoring game against Dallas. Shout out to Josh for having that one. -3 at Houston. The Nuggets are +8 at Milwaukee, and that total's been bet down to 231 as we speak. Hawks -2 at the Thunder. That Grizz game right now, Memphis +3.5. Total's been bet up 7 points to 245. The Raptors are +3 at the Kings with a 238 total. Jazz +3 at Portland, and then the Spurs are +5.5 at the Lakers. Slight rumblings that Anthony Davis might be back tonight out of nowhere, kind of. But we're looking at Nuggets Bucks. It's billed as a matchup of the last 4 MVP winners, and nothing so far to indicate that Jokic is going to miss it, even though he missed 2 games with hamstring issues, and they played last night. He's not a guy who usually, has to sit back-to-backs. It seems like he just kind of had an issue, wanted to sit it out for a game or two, and now he's right back to his thing, getting yet another triple-double and yet another clutch shot to beat New Orleans. I guess the fact that was really low scoring has caused some people to be betting on the under here early, but I would lean on over. I think the numbers really indicate over first and foremost because of Denver. I mean, on the road, already a bad defense, like 28th in opponents' effective field goal shooting and defensive efficiency. But back-to-back situations, they're bad on defense wherever they are. They're 5-1 to the over, going over by an average of 11 per game. They're giving up 120. They're scoring 122. Giving up and hitting about 14 threes, giving up and diming out 29 times, giving up and getting 27 free throws. Those are all high marks when it's a back-to-back. So there's not the same energy in rotations defensively. But, I mean, their offense doesn't take nights off when Jokic is out there, right? You look at the recent trips to Milwaukee, it's been an absolute anomaly of just beatdowns, 3 straight beatdowns of the Bucks in Milwaukee. That's good for a +26.5 net rating in those games. Milwaukee scoring just 104 with a 131 defensive rating. Jokic his typical 135 offensive rating in those 3 games. So even with Brook Lopez active, and I think 2 of those 3, they had no answers. Nobody has any answers for Jokic. The Bucks defense has adjusted a little bit in terms of not just giving up a rampant amount of threes this year, right? They're towards the top of the game in most things, including field goal percentage, limiting free throws. Denver doesn't really care about free throws. They are struggling to deny offensive rebounds. Denver is doing a good job with that, and they are forcing the fewest turnovers in the league somehow. So despite limiting assists overall, their assist to turnover ratio is bad. And they do give up a ton of mid-range shots, which is why I think Joker has been able to operate really well in those areas with them. Jamal Murray might not be able to play on a back-to-back, but if he is, that's another mid-range weapon for them. So in any case, I just don't expect the Nuggets offense to lapse here. Even if Murray is out, maybe MPJ, Bones Highland were both out last night, and that did hurt them. But I think they'll still be able to produce around Joker in this matchup. And you look at Milwaukee's offense, which just exploded with Giannis back after the knee injury. Granted, it's against Detroit, but without Giannis, they were lighting teams up. So now in their last 4, they have a 127 offensive rating. Drew Holiday finally looking like he can carry a major load, and he will continue to be number 2, right? Middleton played 15 minutes in his return last night, but he's not a full go yet. So between Milwaukee scoring 122 at home their last 10 and Denver's back-to-back splits, I feel like we're going over 230 here. If it's bet down to that range, I think you can take the over. And I think we both like Denver to cover 8 for sure if Jokic is in.
Isn't that the caveat for everything we're saying though? Like, should we really harp on that point? Because I just, Milwaukee's 8 point, it's like you said, it's went up half a point in favor of Milwaukee since we even started, recording this podcast this morning, and 8 points for the Bucks without, or 8 points for the Nuggets to cover with Jokic is obvious. The same way that taking them at a -1 spread last night when we thought he was going to play was obvious, and then he did play, and they actually only won by 1 against the Pellies and sort of folded at the end. But I also didn't like how they folded at the end as they're now moving on to Milwaukee and a team that I think with Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, you'll see them able to finish games, which they haven't been that bad necessarily down the stretch of games, but the ones that they haven't been in have been just because of a lack of having their guys there. So I lean over as well if Jokic is in, and that's it. If he's in 232, fine. I'm happy with the over despite Milwaukee's defense, which to be honest, like it's been really, really good for the most part, but I feel like it's been a fluctuating sort of group of guys that we see in there to the point where we just don't really know. I feel like the last few weeks for the Bucks have been such a conundrum. Now there's stability, and I think that's why you instead of looking at what they've done in recent history at all, it's really just important to look at what they've done when they have a healthy Chris Middleton out there with Giannis and Drew, and really if Jokic isn't in there, what they do without him, which is obviously score a lot fewer points, get a lot fewer assists per game. About 5 or 6 less points per game. They get about 5 or 6 less rebounds per game. So, just everything he does. If you're going to get average like a 25 point, 30 point triple double, basically, you're going to be, a lot of those stats are going to be hard to make up. And then I don't know if they come along for the ride with that Milwaukee offense that I think is going to pummel this team. And I think this defense rather on the road, as you've been talking about, which does allow their opponents to do a lot more on defense. You went through a lot of those stats I don't even necessarily need to get into, but it's just another case of home road splits. 18-5 at home for the Bucks, 22-4 at home for the Nuggets. But then you look at the road stats. 12-10 for the Nuggets, still good enough to beat the teams that they should be beating for the most part this season. And they have missed Jokic, I believe, twice on the road this season. So there's 2 points, 2 games right there they kind of threw away. But the offense as well, that's what I'd be worried about coming along. They give up about 116 on the road, but they only score the 114 versus the 120 they score at home, right? And that's really what I'm looking at here, and why I think some of these trends continue to be what they are, and as a home favorite this year, Milwaukee has been covering and sort of going back to their Milwaukee ways that we like to see. It's 16-7 against the spread, specifically when they're the home favorite, and covering that spread by about a point, but that's still an average margin of victory of about 7. So that's about what this is at in this game. And I still think if Joker's not in, I'm not taking Milwaukee in any way, shape, or form unless I knew Joker was out, and still 8 points feels like a lot. So hitting 8 points, to be honest, before you really even know what's happening with Joker is trying to get ahead of it. It probably will rise if he's officially ruled out, as some people might try to go hit it. And then you can, even get it maybe at closer to 9. But even if he's not there, the possibility of them hanging around to cover 9 isn't out of the question by any means. And that's why I still think it's worth it to hit it now.
I'll take Milwaukee to score 120. I think you're right on there to say they're gonna destroy this defense. It's just a question of, will Denver have enough legs if Bones and MPJ are still out? Do they have enough firepower to keep pace on the road? But for Milwaukee, this is a big revenge spot, because I mentioned those last 3 times, just embarrassing losses. The last one, I believe, sparked their kind of run to the championship, or at least one of those did. The last one, I think last season, sparked a run to the conference semis or whatever it was. But each time it's kind of been like a gut check for them. And I think I'll talk about Giannis in particular. His prop's still only at 30 points, even though he cruised to a point per minute against Detroit. I think he leads the charge here. I wouldn't be surprised if they score like 138 tonight. And it's just a question of whether Denver and Jokic is in to keep pace in some way, shape, or form. So I think a team total here is good. But yeah, you're totally right that this is all a caveat. If the Joker sits, Denver's pretty much tossing this game away with already two guys out. Maybe Murray sits as well. You never know, but I mean, it is a high-profile matchup that I think they will want to have their guys for.
Yeah, well, let's see. I mean, if they're serious about wanting this game and wanting not necessarily needing to ease Chris Middleton back into things, but just saying go out there, make it somewhat of a playoff atmosphere, and win this game, because we've only seen Chris Middleton against the Pistons in the last like 3 weeks or whatever, or longer. Then yeah, I think that the Bucks really make sure that they're coming together and winning this game. I think either way, yeah, the points for the Bucks, and then you wait to see if Joker's in or not, if they can really handle this spread. But you really got to be monitoring his status to go ahead and hit those lines pretty quickly. As we know, the books are probably staying on that just as much as we are with the way that Joker impacts games. So
this game, we have Memphis plus 3.5 at the Warriors. The total's been bet up from 237 to 244.5.
Nate told the people it was going to be bet up. I don't know who he told, but he knew it was going to happen.
I don't know if I have the balls to take an under, the way these teams love to get up and down and play, but I do think this is a circled game on the calendar for both teams, and that does mean we should see an above-average defensive effort from one or both, especially the Warriors, who, they have these crazy home road splits. They have these crazy finishes to games that they don't seem to care about. I can't even get into the numbers with them. It's just like a feel thing, I think, where they just circle certain games, such as Memphis on Christmas, such as those two Celtics games, and say, we're going to use this as a litmus test to see if we are up to our championship medal per usual. And then, there's kind of a malaise through the rest of the regular season, because it's just like, wake us up when it's playoff time and time to win. But they have it out for Memphis. I mean, and vice versa. The Grizz gave them their toughest test of the postseason last year. Those Celtics games, I mean, they dominated at home. Probably should have won in Boston, for sure. Even as a Celtics fan, I can say they got hosed a little bit by the refs down the stretch and just didn't close it out. But now at home, I mean, I like the Warriors. It's been bet up 1 point from 2.5 to 3.5, but Memphis is struggling on this road trip. I don't know how much of that is looking ahead to this game. I don't know how much of that is just their front running ways, where they won 7 of those 11 at home. They won most of those road games against shorthanded opponents. And once they get out ahead, yeah, they can crush teams. But if it's not going right early, Josh starts forcing it. Jaren Jackson starts taking bad shots, whatever you want to say. Steven Adams is out tonight. He's kind of a stabilizing force on both ends in terms of getting them good shots. I mean, and the Warriors have done a really good job limiting stars recently. I know Jock gave them the business in the playoffs last year, but you look at some of the lines from the best players in the league. When they face the Warriors, I mean, the combination of a good coaching staff and Draymond being much better of a defensive floor general, I think, recently, has allowed them to kind of put the clamps on those guys or give them an inefficient line in some way. So I don't really see Ja dominating this game. Whereas the Warriors, with Steph back, with Poole playing pretty well off the bench, at least offensively, with Clay playing well alongside Steph, I think they just have a lot more. And they fell into that trap against the Nets, but I think they get back to their winning ways at home here and win pretty comfortably.
Man, this team is a conundrum this season, dude. I mean, I believe them when they say they're terrible on the road at this point, and they're just really good at home. But then they lose to Brooklyn at home last game by 4 points after beating the Cavs without Steph and everyone. So it's just weird, man. And For this one, I'm going under. 244.5 is absolutely absurd for what these two teams have done when they've played, even just in the regular season. Like, they haven't gotten over 125 or 225, 224. Like, these games are 123, 109, 95 to 123, 108 to 116, 113 to 104. Like, three of those totals were under 220. So I'm not sure. I guess, I mean, they played at 106 pace last game, and it was 123, 109. And the only reason that the Dubs were able to get that 123 is hitting 18 threes, which is only two more than they've been making in their last roughly 7 games. But it's still it's somewhat, it's a little bit more than the average for them. Enough that, like, it adds up to 123 after you hit 2 extra threes. But that's why it's just like for this game, it's going to be another playoff atmosphere. The Grizzlies have been playing horrible defense since they started this little road trip that they're on, where they lost 3 in a row to the Lake Show Suns and the Kangs. 105 offensive rating, but that 116.5 defensive rating, allowing 122 points per game. They've been outscored in the fast break, which does not happen. 20-9, that they've been getting up most fast break points at 20 and scoring the 5th fewest at 9, just totally out of their own character. Allowing 16 threes. This is where you get scared of a total, going under on a total, but allowing 16 threes a game, which is the 5th most, and 3 more than their season average, as they're usually much, much better at limiting threes. No matter what they do, they're still going to, I mean, honestly, even without Steven Adams, they're still dominating the paint in terms of scoring in the paint, limiting points in the paint, scoring second chance points, limiting second chance points, all in like the top 3 in the league, and best at a lot of those things. So they're going to be that good at those things no matter what. And that hasn't really bothered the Dubs, because they've just traded 3s for 2s. So the question is, are the Grizzlies going to defend the 3-point line better than they have in the last 3 road games? I would say yes. I would say they're geared up, and the reason they're geared up is, besides the fact that it's the Dubs and they kicked them out of the playoffs and beat them on Christmas without Steph Curry, is the fact that, like, they rested Ja. They rested him against the Kangs, took a 33-point just smack to the chin, giving up like 107 3-pointers in that game, I think it was, or something ridiculous for the Kings, who missed like 2 threes or whatever. So it's how they lose, and they've been giving up threes to guys like Trey Lyles, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, all 6'7" to 6'9" or 10 3-point shooters who can, drive a little bit, or at least take a step inside and shoot if you come out on them, but had all the time in the world to shoot wide open threes. And that's going to be a problem for them if they are letting the splash triplets and, some form of Andrew Wiggins as well put up all those threes. I think they're going to be in big trouble. I still think it goes under 244.5. I just don't see a world where Memphis just hemorrhages points like that, and the Dubs are not getting back on defense. Their defense has been better, and I really focus on the last 7 games for them, because that's when Steph came back. They missed him for like a month before that, and then everything else was so long ago that just doesn't seem as relevant. But they are 6-1 to the over, averaging about 242 a game in those games, still not 244.5. But 3 and 4 as well. They are playing at that huge, super fast pace. But that offensive rating at 115 just isn't there right now, and it looks stagnant at times. And it's really just threes bailing them out from Jordan Poole, Clay, and Steph, because they've been making 18.5 of those a game, and still getting the dimes that they get. We always know they're going to be in the top 5 in assists in the league. So it's not like that's really going to change almost ever, even when Steph's not out there, because of the style they play. But they've been 3rd in fast break points. Memphis has been getting back on defense. So I think if they can limit what free throws for Memphis, who they get some, but they're obviously not, like, that's not their bread and butter, is getting to the line outside of necessarily Ja, but it is a huge point of emphasis with the second chance points that they get around the rim and the way they crash the offensive boards. If the Dubs continue to give up this, the amount of free throws that they have, they've fouled the most in their last 7 games. They've given up the 2nd most free throw attempts as a result, allowing 7th most assists. So you worry that they're going to be vulnerable in the places that Memphis can't score, and that this 104 to 106 pace that these teams are capable of playing with Ja in there and Steph scares you. But once again, those two dudes have been in there for 3 of those last 4 matchups that they've played, and these totals have failed once again to get to 225. So I think we're all getting a bit ahead of ourselves with these insane totals, and we need to relax a little bit and realize, even if this game's at 235, that's a very fast, high-scoring game, and it's way less than that 244. So that's still my favorite bet.
Yeah, because one of these teams can get shut down when they play, because the other one is so fired up to play them. That being said, I mean, you look at what Steph, I think this might be the game Steph totally takes off. I talk about them wanting games, and the last 3 times they've hosted Memphis, Steph has averaged 43 points per game, and he's taken 56 threes and hit 24 of them. So his prop is at 4.5 threes, which we thought was low against the Celtics, and he had 5 by the end of the third quarter. Because again, when they want games, I think he took 17 to 19 at threes against the Celtics. It's just like, all right, we're playing a pretty good defense. They're going to be fired up. We're just going to try to break that defense with Steph hitting impossible shots, and he often does, especially at home. So I think you want to look at his threes there, and as part of the equation here for Golden State probably pulling away at some point, and just Memphis not being as good at home. Again, what I said about them not being as good when they don't get out in front early. I'd expect that typical Warriors avalanche to allow them to cover the spread.
Yeah, and you're still getting a little bit of value on that 27.5 points for Steph Curry, considering that, this might be closer to 30 if he hadn't missed a game here or there, and still been coming back to normal for him. So we'll see. Either way, I think, this is going to be a pretty close game, and I do like that too. Well, let me be very clear. It might not be like you said. I think it's going to be a fun game. One team is going to play it very, very, very well, but the way that this matchup has gone, there hasn't been a game closer than like 8 or 9 points in the last like 5 or 6 matchups that they played. A lot of blowouts as they sort of just give up at some point, and one of these teams is so fired up to play the other one but I think in this case both of them will be. Like I said, Josh sat, the Dubs know they need this just as much as anything, and they get up for these games, so they're both going to be going at it, creating a little bit more of that playoff atmosphere, creating a little bit lower of a score. So 244.5 is absolutely absurd. The NBA is drunk right now, and we're still loving it though because it's super fun. Nate, let's go ahead and jump into your first play-up prop for tonight.
Yeah, I'm going back with Giannis. 2 nights ago, we took him, thought his props were a little low as he came back from a 12-day layoff to rest that knee, missed 5 games, and then looked good, looked very sharp, 20 points in the first half against Detroit. Of course, they coast to a win. He just barely got over with 29 in limited minutes. And, I mean, you could be worried about a blowout against Denver if Joker sits. But I think Giannis still can go over 30 points in that situation. I mean, he had 30 plus in 9 straight home games before his knee kind of gave out in that Charlotte game, and he took a rest after that. He's scoring about a point per minute, so even if he gets about 30 minutes in a blowout, that's where we're at. And Denver, we talked about in the game video, their defense is awful on the road and particularly awful on back-to-back situations. Giving up 120, giving up 27 free throw attempts per game. But more than that, this is like a motivation factor. I mean, Denver has blown out Milwaukee in 3 straight trips up to the Midwest there. And Giannis responds after these losses. I mean, even in those blowouts, by the way, he had 29 points per game in about 30 minutes. And you look at this season, the last 4 times he played after a Bucks loss, 55-10-7 against Washington after his squad lost to Washington without him, 30, 12-9 against the Warriors in just 30 minutes on a poor shooting night, 38-9-6 against Cleveland's top defense on a good shooting night in 30 minutes, and 37-7-6 against Portland, which is, still a better defense than Denver in terms of guarding this position. Aaron Gordon is a solid individual defender, but I just think the way Denver gets up and down and the way Giannis is able to just knife through defenses that are not completely set. 30 points, this is my most confident bet here.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, ride the Giannis train. This is another team that doesn't necessarily have a good matchup for him. Not that there is one. I suppose Aaron Gordon could do a decent job, but like you said, he still just knifes through this defense, which is even weaker on the road for Denver. So I do like him to be able to have a solid game tonight. 30.5, man, so high. We just need him to get the minutes. Obviously, he failed to get it 30 last time, only because of playing 26 minutes. But so like you said, more than a point a minute. And if he's going to be playing the closer to 35, if this is close, I think it might be closer than 8, even if Joker doesn't play. But we'll see. Obviously, they're very motivated at home, and Giannis would be a huge reason for that. So let's go to a game. We also had that game video up about the Dubs and the Grizzlies. We talked about Steph. I mean, it's worth mentioning that he's at 27.5 points. It's a lot, but I mean, I think he's going to hit more than 4.5 threes as well. It's a game that he gets up for. This team gets up for. You mentioned how many shots he puts up and makes. So Steph is definitely a good bet to hit 5 threes and probably to get the 28 points. Clay's prop is just a lot lower and nice and comfortable looking at 21.5 points, and you still get pretty much even money if you bet that on FanDuel. Shout out that odds finder tool for letting us know that. But yeah, you know he's going to come against Memphis. He had 24 last game on 8 for 25 shooting versus the Grizz. He's going to be getting those close to that amount. Maybe he'll only shoot the ball 22 times this game because Steph is back and he wasn't in that last Memphis game, but his usage like barely drops when Steph's on the floor, still keeps it at about 29%. So in his last 10, he's had at least 24, by the way, in 8 of his last 10, only needs 22 tonight to hit that prop. He's averaging 27 over those last 10, 45% from the field and 42 from deep, making about 4.8, so about 5 threes a game on about 12 attempts. And I think you can continue to expect them to continue pulling that. It's been their offense. I mean, they've made 18.5 threes a game in their last 7 since Steph came back from injury and that's because their offense, while there's plenty of assists going on, there's still a lot of sort of, there's not that many other ways for them to score. They're not getting out in transition. Wiggins hasn't looked the same. And between he and Poole, that's their offensive outbreak for fast breaking. They haven't been doing it. They've just been scoring on threes, to be honest with you. So Memphis been so bad at defending the three, and that's sort of the concern for them tonight. They've been bad in their last roughly 3 or 4, and they're bottom 10 in terms of defending shooting guards when it comes to points per game, assists, and rebounds per game. All those categories, especially the points. We just saw them give up like at least 5 threes to Keegan Murray, Trey Lyles, and Harrison Barnes in that Kings game, and I think you can expect a bit more of that sort of leakage, if you will, against this much better team. And Clay to get 22, just much easier. He's been playing like an all-star for a while now, and 21.5 is still way too low for him.
Yeah, we talk about fewer shots, but better quality of shots when Steph is playing for Clay. This is like deja vu from last Thursday where we're like, I like Clay, I like Steph overs, but I like under on this absurd game total against the Celtics team that's going to be played at a playoff atmosphere. Yeah. And sure enough, way under in regulation and still went under the final total in overtime. So I think you can be on that again here. Warriors get their points. I do worry about a blowout for either of these guys not getting there, which is, I think, why I like Steph to hit 5 threes in 3 quarters if necessary before Memphis says goodnight, if that is how this plays out. Another guy we've gone to often here this year, polarizing figure Ben Simmons, playing the Sixers again. If Embiid does not play, that paint will open up a lot, and you got to like his points a little bit more. Either way, he's responded to that 0-9-13 line against Boston where he didn't look at the basket by scoring 7.5, taking 7 field goal attempts, mostly dunks, in the last 4 of the road trip for the Nets. So now you look at his numbers without KD in 5 games, 6.7 rebounds, 9 assists. And that includes just 18 minutes at Phoenix because he just couldn't play due to foul trouble. So there's a lot of props to look at here. And certainly, I would rather go rebounds assists, though, at 14.5, even though he is maybe looking at the basket more. I mean, you can always have just that 0 in the point category, which is going to screw you if you pair that with anything else. But I think I like the steals more than anything at plus 123 at Caesars because he's playing Philly. And motivation manifests on the defensive end for Simmons, who can definitely guard with the best of them. I mean, he had 3 steals and 3 blocks in that first trip back to Philly in November. Also 11, 7, and 11 in 32 minutes. The Nets, allowing him to try to get that revenge, to try to get that monkey off his back by performing well against the team and the city that booed him. And Philly's just straight awful guarding the backcourt, right? I mean, third most assists per game to point guards in the last 7. So if you do want his assists at 7.5, that's fine. In their last 11 overall, they're giving up 118 points and 26 assists, limited rebounds because they are scoring at such an efficient rate. So, maybe you just want assists here, but I think the steals is intriguing if you can get plus odds.
Yeah, it's a hustle stat. So in this game, he's going to be going crazy for those steals and blocks. I love taking any of it with the steals and blocks. The plus 123 for 2 steals is fine. Stocks is fine. He even made a free throw, by the way, in that Philly game, which was hilarious.
3.
He made 3 free throws in that game.
6, yeah.
Apologies. Yeah, sorry, Ben. Yeah, I'm not touching the points. I think I'd still just take the rebounds and assists of the stocks and just leave it at that. Call it a day, with or without Embiid. To be honest with you, a much better bet if he's not in there. But I think you can get value on the rebounds and assists more than anything tonight. So, Gary Trent Jr. This game, and we got to take an over. It's Toronto and Sac. There's obviously a huge monster total of 237.5. Didn't think it was going to be the second biggest total on the night, but it is to that 244.5 that Memphis and Golden State grew to. But this is still going to be a super up and down game. And Gary Trent's at 19.5 points, over 2.5 threes. I think there's opportunity to take a couple guys in this game. I mean, OG Anunoby might not play, and if he doesn't, this Raptors defense is horrible. And then you can start looking at guys like Harrison Barnes, maybe Kevin Huerter, maybe even De'Aaron Fox. But regardless, I actually don't know if he's going to play or not. Gary Trent, I like him to get the 20 and the 3 threes because of the fact that he's been in there for 36 minutes a game over his last 10, as he's really been one of the healthier, more consistent shooting guards, and really their only 3-point threat, and that's why he's out there 36 minutes a game. Fred VanVleet been a much more inconsistent this season. Gary Trent Jr. is sort of making himself a very prized potential trade piece if they wanted to, unless they want to pay him next year, but averaging 20.5 in his last 10 in those 36 minutes, 15 field goals a game at about a 27.5% usage rate, 3 for about 7.5 attempts from deep. So to hit those 3 threes feels like it's a pretty good bet tonight. Not great odds, like minus 120, but I think you can get that, if he hits those 3 threes and you think he's cooking enough. Like I said, in the 36 minutes with that amount of, those amount of shooters and everything, the lack of shooters on their team, I think Gary Trent's a great bet to get that. Sac is vulnerable at the shooting guard position, allowing the 5th most points and the 8th most 3-pointers. They are a very good 3-point defense, which is the only thing that sort of, makes you pause and think about Gary Trent for a minute. But I'm still not worried about that. I think he's got the opportunity and the minutes and the usage at this point. There's just the sheer volume with him shooting close to 50% from deep. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about Gary tonight.
Yeah, it's kind of surprised the total's only 237 when you talk about totals going crazy. Usually in Sacramento is where we get those crazy totals. They just scored 133 on Memphis. And yeah, there's a lot to like on both sides of this game. We couldn't really decide between all the options. Harrison Barnes, intriguing. I think I would go De'Aaron Fox. He's just 6.5 assists because that's kind of a way to get exposure to the whole Kings machine right now. He's diming up so much at home. 6.5 assists is minus odds, but I think I would go 8 assists or more, or the 11.5 rebounds assists for Mr. Fox in a game that should be up and down. If OG Anunoby sits, I really like it because he could otherwise, spend a lot of time guarding Fox.
Yeah, 100% with you on that one. It's going to be a fun game to watch. Great slate tonight. So that is all the time we have for you in this one. Make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along with us. And until we see you next, happy betting.